And did that recording start? Okay, great. So we're all pretty familiar at this point, but a few Zoom tips. The chat function will allow you to comment or ask a question via writing. Again, BPA staff will be assisting me with that. During a Q&A period towards the end of the presentation, we very much encourage people to raise their hand using the raise hand function. I'll call people in order, and please unmute and or start video as you so choose. So Zoom etiquette, just some ground rules to set the stage for the evening. We encourage people to turn their cameras on while speaking. I really want to make sure that everyone gets attended to. I know there's a lot of voices to be heard, so we will be trying to enforce a 2-minute rule. So just please be mindful. And if you come back to make another statement, I may prioritize other people who haven't had the chance to speak after. We will expect that everyone respect one another and any differences of opinion. We're all neighbors here. We all want to make sure we're hearing and being respectful of one another. If there is unacceptable behavior, such as threatening, bullying, harassment, any threats or anything of the nature, we'll give a warning of some kind. You may be ejected from the meeting. So hopefully we won't come to that, but we just want to make sure that this is a good space for everybody involved. The goals for this discussion. So the last time we all convened on this project, we were able to hear some high-level feedback from the community about what they would like to see with this pier. We've since translated that into a high-level design and development guidelines, which we hope to implement with the RFP. So we're eager to share that out with you, hear your thoughts and perspectives, and then make sure that that is fully representative of your thoughts. So just an agenda for the evening. I'm just going to go over the project location and a planning overview briefly, in case there's anybody new to the call or the project, so they have that context. I'll then present the draft development and design guidelines, an overview of just how the disposition process works. So if you have any questions about that, we can answer. We'll open it up for a Q&A period and then wrap up at 7:30 with some next steps. So the project overview and location. So we're in Charlestown. This is at Pier 5, located at the dot here. This was originally built as a Navy pier and reconstructed with concrete in 1943. So we've had a disposition history with this site in 2007. In most recent history in 2007, there was a proposal to build 89 units with a cafe and exterior space. And even more recently, into September 2020, the BPDA released an RFP to redevelop the property for open space and residential as well. If we can just ask everyone to stay muted, that would be great. So again, as we review the future of the site, there's a lot of planning context and zoning that needs to be considered. So at its base, the zoning district falls under the Harbor Park Article 42. Also Chapter 91 qualifies, where it enforces the promotion and protection of water dependent uses in public facilities to increase access to the waterfront for Bostonians. We've also been reading into the Charlestown Navy Yard Master Plan from 1978 that was also updated in 91 and 2008 that encouraged the adaptive reuse and redevelopment of the pier, as well as the 2007 Waterfront Activation Plan that focused a lot on the civic and cultural spaces that were encouraged on the site. More recent plans include Climate Ready Boston and Imagine Boston, which really wanted to leverage underutilized waterfront sites and also be aware of the impacts of climate change. And as we began to study that and continue to do so, Plan Charlestown focused on improving connectivity, again, adaptive reuse and waterfront activation. And the Coastal Resilience Solution for East Boston and Charlestown Phase 2 really focused on making sure that if we are implementing new harbor walks, that they be raised to a certain extent. And with that in mind, we're continuing to study the impacts of climate change and how we can strengthen the coastal resilience of our properties. So currently, simultaneously to this RFP process, there will be a flood vulnerability study that's led by our coastal resilience team that will show not only the 2030s impacts of sea level rise, which is estimated to be about 9 inches, but also 40 inches as well by the 2070s. And so we're making sure that whatever design guidelines that we're offering forward within the RFP are reflective of those changing and something that can be resilient and adaptive to the impacts of that. And most recently, as many of you may be aware, for this, in advance of a disposition process, we retained an engineering report to not only assess the structure of the pier, but also the financial feasibility of repairing it. So 3 concepts were explored within that engineering scope. Program A was explored to improve the existing pier for pedestrians. Program B was about the potential for a public park and a sailing center. So again, kind of more complex uses. And then program C was the demolition of the pier in order to create a water sheet for potential new uses and what those costs could potentially be. So at a very high level overview, the average cost per program was for a full pier repair, 18 to 32 million, for an L-shaped pier to be implemented, 10 to 15 million, and for a floating marina, about 11 million. There was an entire community meeting based on this engineering report. So if one of my colleagues could just drop the Pier 5 disposition planning website in the chat, what you can learn from there is you can not only see the report, you can see a recording of the meeting, the presentation slides, the chat. So you can kind of get a better sense of the details of that project if you so choose. We also wanted to note that the BPDA may contribute a sum for the demolition of the pier in order to help advance this project, somewhere between 7 to 8 million. Again, we would like to do this in partnership with in a public-private partnership because we want to work collaboratively to imagine the best and grandest possible use we possibly could. So, and now finally, the draft and development guidelines. So again, after that engineering community engagement meeting, there were so many public comments that were submitted. So I just want to thank many people on this call for emailing, getting letters of support together, using the public portal, comment portal in order to share their opinions. It was just such a testament to how much people care about this pier. So I pulled some quotes, which I thought really highlighted a lot of widespread community sentiments that I just wanted to share out. So the first one being about boating, swimming, and fishing, and the idea of creating spaces for community events that are both maybe indoor or outdoor. The idea of having pedestrian walkways that would allow for socialization and other amenities like playgrounds or artist space, or that could accommodate people of all ages and abilities. Other people focused on making it educational and welcomed historic ideas to be represented proudly within the pier. Then also encouraging public gathering spaces and maritime recreation activities. And then lastly, focusing on the resilience efforts needed for the Charlestown Navy Yard and making sure we were coordinated in that planning with other important partners. So again, just want to highlight how rich the public comment was, and it was really helpful to go through all of that. And so we worked with some of our colleagues in urban design to start to gather different types of inspiration images that would help us kind of visualize some of those thoughts. So the first one in our own backyard, Seaport Pier 4, I think offered a lot of ways for us to connect to the waterfront and also promoted certain types of walkability and green space. There was a Sugar Beach in Toronto, which also gave us different inspirations of different ways we could recreate, maybe different materials we could use, as well as the Gaines and Fort Worth Peninsula, also in the Hudson Yard Park area in New York City. We also have the Brooklyn Bridge Park, which again, a great example of the pedestrian experience. Our very own Menino Park, and offering playgrounds and again, accessible to multiple ages and backgrounds. And then finally, the Transit Pier in DC was another great example we found, which really focused on a lot of public programming, which really enticed us, and temporary furniture in order to adapt to different types of programming offered. So with all this in mind, community comments and work with our colleagues, we then begin to draft what are the guidelines for the RFP. This is meant to be descriptive of the community feedback and guide any proponent on being as imaginative as possible towards their proposal. So the first is the development plan. We expect that any proposal describes the development team's experience and qualifications and how the plan can be executed, because we want to make sure that if we are to select a public-private partnership, that the project be realized, and we want to make sure that's thoroughly thought through. Another standard within the BPDA practices is the diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. This is in an effort to increase the opportunities for people of color, women and minority-owned business enterprises to participate in the development of the property. And so we expect there to be specific strategies about how to maximize that participation from the creation of the proposal all the way to the operation of the site. And again, this is of particular importance, so we weight this criterion about 25%. And so the next three are really specific to Pier 5, and ones I look forward to hearing your comments and suggestions about. The first one is the waterfront access and education. So we want to make sure that the programming opportunities as well as the infrastructure really focuses on different type of recreation and access to the waterfront. So key elements of that came through in the public comments were sailing, kayaking, boating, swimming, fishing, floating pools, and festivals. So we welcome different proposals that can highlight any or multiple parts of those things. We also wanted to focus on the history of the Navy Yard, marine biology, and maritime instruction as related to that as well. For public and open space, we wanted to make sure that residents of Charlestown, Boston, and tourists from all over the world had the opportunity to gather and appreciate the coastline from this perspective. So we want to make sure that there's infrastructural investments such as public art, pedestrian walkways, playgrounds, benches, picnic tables, and an outdoor theater. And we want to make sure that the designs focus on connecting the Harbor Walk and Pier 4 on views that focus on that great city and harbor skyline. And then finally, we have the coastal resilience elements. So we want to make sure that in general, all projects on city-owned land support sustainable, resilient, and healthy new construction. Proposals should target net zero energy or zero carbon performance. But additionally, the flood vulnerability study that I had mentioned, we want to make sure that all designs are compliant with the information we hear back from that, as well as other zoning regulations, such as the Coastal Resilience Solutions and Chapter 91. So very briefly now, for anyone who's unfamiliar with how the disposition process works, I just want to review that at a high level. So once we write the RFP, we're going to issue it through our procurement portal. And at maximum, that will be out for about 90 days. We then review the proposals internally, depending on how many we get. And it's also expected that the proponents present their proposals to the community, and we get feedback and public comment throughout that whole process. Following that lengthy internal and external evaluation process, we select a developer and present that to the BPDA board, at which point the developer or the proponent will complete all their Article 80 or work towards completing all their Article 80, permitting, financing, in order to see the project through. We will then go to the board again for a final vote, execute the ground lease and close on financing, and then hopefully get construction underway. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the community. Again, I really encourage people to raise their hands. We'd love to talk through any questions you may have. We're going to try to keep it 2 minutes each for each person. And yeah, so please feel free to raise your hand and we can get started. Kathy? Kathy? You're still muted.
Not being totally familiar with the RSFP process, considering this is a pier, what do you mean by ground lease? I consider, ground lease would be something, of a commercial nature, but could you just explain what you mean in that diagram by the ground lease?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as we want to make sure we convey the property, but we usually do that through a very, very long-term ground lease. So we'll negotiate with the potential proponent. So they will effectively be the owner of it, but we will retain ownership of the pier itself.
And that doesn't indicate there's going to be a 6-story building on the pier.
No, that ground lease actually allows us to ensure that we're that certain things that were promised in the RFP process, we'll make sure it's a element of the lease itself. So
Great. All right.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Diane?
Hi, I'm a little not clear about what your process is because, as you know, throughout the city of Boston, neighborhoods are very concerned about community engagement. And it seems to me that this will be decided by the BPDA and then submitted to the community for feedback. But what's the protocol to have community participation in the process, not just to comment after the decisions are made?
So no decision will be made until we have a community meeting where the proponents, any amount of proposals we receive will be presented by the teams themselves to the community, at which point the community can not only ask questions during the meeting, but also through the public comment. And that is weighted incredibly highly by our internal staff as we evaluate the proposals. And only after that evaluation periods happen would we ever approach the board. So typically our internal evaluation process also helps guide whatever developer is selected and gives them that initial feedback. But no decision will be made without a full community meeting and input through public comment. Thanks, Diane. Zachary?
What are the names of the organization that helped you make this last report, the urban planning and design? You said you selected some organizations randomly.
For the engineering
report? How were they selected? Yeah, for the report you just presented.
Yes. So our capital, so that was led by a construction or engineering company called Foth, and we held our own RFP process for that. So our capital construction colleagues within the real estate department held a similar RFP process where there were bidders to it and they were evaluated, and Foth was selected. So I did not personally lead that process, but it was through.
And who's the contact person there?
You can contact me and I can get you in touch with my colleague that led that RFP process and is the main point of contact for that engineering consultant.
Okay, thank you.
If anyone could put my information in the chat, that would be great. Thanks, Zachary. Dan?
There you go. Sorry, screen's a little jittery there. The city of Boston is slowly evolving here with the PDDA. What is the strategy for the property after the absorption of the PDDA? Is the intent going to be that it will be held indefinitely in the PDDA property pool, or will it be part of the city of Boston? There's another follow-up to that.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So the land itself will be with the BPDA. So we will be going through all the same board procedures as we normally do. So the people within the BPDA are currently being transitioned over, but the land as it is right now will remain the same. Dan, do you have another quick question?
Yeah, so I just want to add to that. So there's no way that we can make it a trust space. So it's an independent property space.
I think that we will, as we create the RFP, we will determine, I think with the ground lease is the current iteration that we're working to move forward with. But that's certainly something within the RFP drafting process will, and a public comment that we'll take seriously as we consider that.
Please do. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Robert?
So this is in a flood zone, right? And at least maybe not today, but I think once you elevate the boardwalk, or you decide to do differently. So what kind of limitation does it have? What you can do on this? Because hello.
Yes, someone accidentally unmuted, but did you have any other point, or would you like?
No, it's just basically what are the limitations for what you can do there, given the fact it's a flood zone, and at some point in time you're gonna either elevate the boardwalk, or you're gonna do something on First Avenue.
No, it's something we're really considering, and that's why we're really pleased that the flood vulnerability study that's happening throughout this year is going to line up with this. So the flood vulnerability study is assessing potential sea level rise up into the 2070s, and the study will also determine or create recommendations for design guidelines for that area. So we fully intend to make sure that our colleagues in coastal resilience and the work that they're doing is fully incorporated and is an absolute requirement with any sort of proposal moving forward. And that's very clearly spelled out within the RFP. So we definitely hear you on that. Thank you, Robert. Richard?
Thanks. Will the community see all of the proposals that are submitted, or will they be selected and winnowed down according to what you all feel is an appropriate proposal?
Nope. So all community members will see all proposals that meet the minimum submission requirements. So any proposal that comes in, the RFP says that this is what's expected to be included within that. So so long as it meets those basic needs, which include disclosures and things of that nature, then all submissions will be made publicly available the next day we receive them. So the community can read them independently far in advance of a community meeting happening when the proponent will present the proposals themselves. Thank you. Barbara?
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to ask questions. I'm just curious, what criteria will you use to evaluate the relative merits of those teams that propose?
It's a great question. So the slide I shared earlier about the draft development and design guidelines, that will heavily impact the evaluation criteria. So we will pull that information and put it in an evaluation criteria that's in a whole separate section. So it's very clear to the developer or the proponent what they will be scored on and what is considered highly advantageous or not advantageous. So certainly the design guidelines and the development plan and scope, as well as the team's experience, their qualifications, the feasibility of the project as they presented it, are all going to be ranked within that evaluation criteria section. So great question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bob?
Yes, the mayor is establishing a new planning department at City Hall, separate from the BPDA. Will this new planning organization have a role in any decision making?
We are all becoming a part of the planning department. So currently the people of the BPDA, myself included, and those on this team are being transferred into the city planning department. So it will become a core function of government. However, the land that we work with still remains a part of the BPDA. So the people on this call will all be working on this project and continuing to move it forward. The land itself will be a part of the BPDA scope or purview. So it's a period of transition, but it's one that won't impact the project timeline moving it forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Zachary, I know you spoke already, so I know there was some chat. Was it? Oh, I just got a personal message from Richard Tilburg. Richard, I don't know if you want to, I know you had some trouble with the raise hand function. So if you'd like to unmute and speak.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
the question is, I think it's the second or third box in your flow chart where you review the proposals. Will the community have a place at that table so that it's actually a part of the review and not a separate review? I understand that the community will see all of the proposals, but will it be a formal input into the decision-making at that stage, that early stage?
So we can open that for public comment. It would be great to think about that a little bit further. Our internal review is to really just tap our subject matter expert colleagues, whether they be transportation planners or architects or landscape architects, to make sure we're getting some of that subject matter expertise. And yeah, so I would look forward to potentially iterating on that if that's of interest to the community, but certainly that analysis we can make sure is a part of the process as well, and that the proponents themselves, who are the ones who kind of shape the proposals and understand them best and what the vision is there's a direct point of contact in that community meeting for you to contact them. Thank you. Jules?
I want to comment on some of the other content in the deck, but I do also want to acknowledge these questions that are coming in are fantastic, and I'm really glad that people are thinking of angles that some of us wouldn't think of. But I did want to comment on your reflections of the last meeting, where many of us were at the last meeting, and I do hear an accurate reflection of what I at least interpreted the meeting to be conveying in terms of community sentiment. What I'm reading here from you is an emphasis on complete or nearly complete public access to the area. And I really appreciate that you captured the sentiment around integrating with Pier 4 and the Harbor Walk as a very large vision for an asset, a public asset. And I keep saying public asset because that's what everyone kept saying, full access and mostly outdoor recreation with the additional things that you noted around sailing education and marine education and swimming education, and all the things that, again, I'm just sort of emphasizing that I think you caught it accurately. And I don't want you to leave this meeting without you hearing that from myself, and probably other people will have some opinions on that as well. There's one tiny little functional thing I can add to that, which is I've observed in other major cities that you can create a really interesting year-round use of a pier or a harborfront area with a sauna activity, with literally swimming in the ocean and a sauna building. I've even seen unmanned and app-enabled in major Scandinavian cities, so they're pretty easy in some ways to run. And we had a nice implementation on the Greenway by Moki this winter ourselves. So we had our own successful Boston sauna, but it's a nice way to ensure, in addition to playgrounds and event spaces and educational centers, that it's not just a summertime destination, but that the water is accessed in other ways throughout the year.
Thank you, Jules. I appreciate the kind words, and I also think that's a great comment. And yeah, I also appreciate everyone here and the questions they're raising, as you also pointed out, and that's definitely helped keep just an abundance of information to help us in the process. So thank you. So it's Robert.
Yeah, so based on what I hear from you, Natalie, so removal of the pier and giving it back to, let's say, the marina is totally out of scope?
There's so the third program offered the potential for the demolishing of the pier to clear way for a new water sheet for a new redevelopment there. So again, that engineering report was to provide some essential information about the condition of the pier and where it's at, as well as the financial pathways it would take from certain redevelopment strategies. So we wanted to use that information to help guide any proponent who's making a plan about how to approach this asset, and give them as much information as possible. So we'll have to see when the proposals come back what selection is made and go from there, but that's some of the context.
But so you will include proposals that include removal of the pier and giving it to the marina in that, so you will also facilitate those proposals, all of them. or not?
All proposals will be evaluated
Okay.
that meet the submission requirements. Yeah. So that they will all be able to present. So long as they meet the minimum submission requirements, they will be able to be presented to the community and evaluated in their entirety.
But your priority and preference would be for public access, as you said before.
Yeah. So what you said in that chart I provided earlier, that will be translated into an evaluation criteria, and those elements will be ranked as highly advantageous, so they would score higher the more of those that are being met within a proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Natalie,
Yep.
just very quickly before we go on, I
Yes.
noticed there's some questions about timeline and process and when the RFP is expected to come out. So just want to, I think there's a couple, one under that theme, if you want to speak to that very quickly.
Yeah, thank you. It's hard for me to keep an eye on the chat, so please feel free to interrupt. That was going to be my wrap-up slides, but happy to go through it. So our hope is that in early, late spring, early summer, we're going to release the RFP, draft the whole thing and release it. We want to make sure that we're thoroughly going through the entirety of the document and making sure all of this public comments incorporated. Then there will be about 3 months where it is kind of open and people who are interested in applying can prepare these very lengthy proposals. And so the hope is that by early fall, we're presenting out these proposals and sharing them with the community. James?
Thank you, Natalie and Rebecca and others on the BPDA staff. I agree with some earlier comments. This has really galvanized a lot of the community input from the last meeting, and I truly want to applaud your group for putting this together, a project that truly emphasizes public access, community amenities, and so forth. And I'd like to just add to that. My view of this site and the sort of the importance of this to realize not just those that you mentioned, DEI and others very worthy sites, accessibility, but 5 key goals from your Plan Charlestown report. You mentioned there the 5 key elements will be improved connectivity, both intra community within Charlestown and external, adaptive reuse and preservation, of course, waterfront activation, of course, resilience that you've already mentioned. But a 5th one, which I hope you can address a bit more, which is economic development. And the potential of this site for that, you hinted at tourism, but it really goes beyond that, doesn't it? The ability to have water access through the water shuttle to the site can sort of spearhead or accelerate your inner harbor loop plan for water access to other key communities like East Boston, South Boston, Seaport, etc. So there's this potential of this site to become a catalyst for all of these other plans, tourism, this inner harbor loop that improves water transportation, not just for recreation, but also for commuting. So there's a real benefit. And I'd like you to expand on that. You mentioned that BPDA is willing to contribute $7 to $8 million towards the project. And I assume that is contribution beyond demolition, which you have budgeted. No? So
it is for the demolition, and it is only to be used in hopes of creating that public-private partnership.
I see.
But your
Okay.
points are well understood that this could lock a lot of economic development partnerships. So we look forward to, we understand that while a proponent may be just one of the public-private partnership members, that there are a lot of other agencies and partners that are going to be needed, community, intergovernmental, philanthropic, otherwise, in order to realize this. So I think it's there will be a lot of people involved, and that is absolutely a strong element, and one that we can look to see be further emphasized within the RFP itself.
But specifically, will the BPDA be in a position to contribute additional funds towards such a public-private partnership? That's the first part of the question. And the second part specifically addresses the connectivity issue. Does the BPDA intend with this project to have a real plan to implement greater connectivity between the Navy Yard and the Charlestown area proper north of the Chelsea Street? Thank you.
So the funding, as I've understood it, is what I've explained with the demolition. So that is the information I have available. However, I think in terms of the economic development, I think we'll have to wait and see what proposals we get back, and understand what type of development plan they're offering in addition to design and that scope. But certainly the intent of what you're saying would be respected at that stage. I just want to make sure that we understand what the proposals are and the type of uses that they're offering, but before we get to that point.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. Laura?
Hi, this is actually Mark Gallagher. I'm on my wife's account here. My question relates to weighting. So you mentioned that there would be, criterion broken into several individual criteria and those be weighted. My first question is, how will the community's input be weighted into that? Because as we've seen with the transfer of the Constitution in Plan Charlestown, as a community, I'm sure you're well aware of Charlestown's lack of trust with the BPDA at the moment. So we'd like to know how that would actually be weighted, and if you could provide a full list showing what the weight of each of these things would be.
I think it's a great point, seeing how we can formalize that. I do think that past disposition efforts for the site show that we want to make sure we're getting it right with the community. And I think that this process and the disposition history and what's led us here today has evolved because we wanted to be as responsive to the community as possible and reflect that within the design and development guidelines. So I think that it would be absolutely imperative that there's community buy-in with the process and the RFP and the proposals that are set forth in order to move it forward. And I hope that the RFP and what's dictated in it is something that will ensure that the type of proposals we get are things that everybody in the community widely wants. So thank you, definitely heard. And we know we're working to earn that trust. And I hope that that's being reflected within the RFP itself.
Well, one way to earn that trust would actually be to have community input in the RFP before this actually goes out. Because what we're essentially doing is responding at this point, the way it's set up. You write an RFP, you give people 90 days, which seems like a short period of time to me, to put something forth. And then you make a decision as to what you select out of that, and then we get to comment on that. I understand that you've looked to the community to cherry pick some concepts to put together that RFP, but why wouldn't you actually take the RFP and put it to the community to say, what are your thoughts on the selected comments that we've brought in?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point, and one we'll probably have to iterate on and work through further, more than just I can address in this. So please feel free to email me, and I'd be happy to connect, and we can possibly see how we can ensure that the community voice is heard in the public comment.
I think the one thing I would add to that, Mark, is we are here today to sort of regurgitate what we have heard that will inform the RFP. This is very much still a work in progress, and we were looking to adapt and change. The development and design guidelines were purely meant to provide material that people could be responsive to and to really try to summarize, what we believe that we heard and ways that it can be improved. But this is the feedback that we're looking for tonight and continuing on is, are there things that we should be including in the RFP? I think to the point that James brought up earlier, thinking through economic development as a portion of this is something that could be added. So this is very much intended to be a conversation where, we continue to iterate and advance the criteria, not, meant to be, this is what it is, and we're going to advance. We want to hear and we want to see how this could be adapted to be better responsive to everything that we're hearing tonight and through the process.
And I'm sure you guys are working towards that. It's just something that we've heard before.
Appreciate that.
Understood. Thank you, Mark. Pamela?
Yes. Hi, thank you very much. It's wonderful to hear you speaking. I feel quite confident that you're doing everything you can to make this a wonderful place. I would like to just throw in the mix here. Someone mentioned it earlier, but we live here on the ocean and it's very hard for us to actually get into the ocean. There's really no dedicated swimming space, although I've heard there are some other things that I've heard not having to do with this particular project that would facilitate swimming. But I know for me, I drive, all the way up to the North Shore 3 times a week just to get into the ocean to go swimming. And here we are surrounded by it. And I live, 100 feet from the ocean and I can't really get into the ocean. So I'm just wondering if you've got that in your head, maybe designating a certain inlet or, dry dock or some area where we could cordon it off and make it safe for swimmers. And, I know that brings a whole host of other things, but I would just love to see some place where people could actually get in the water and enjoy the salt water. So I'm just going to throw that in. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. That was definitely an opinion that we heard loud and clear from the public comment process as well. So you're not alone. And that's what in the waterfront access and education criteria, we specifically call out any infrastructural improvements or programmatic opportunities that can support more swimming options is definitely something we would consider as highly advantageous. So definitely heard and shared by many community members too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bruce?
Yeah, hi. How does the experience with the reconstruction of Pier 4 affect any thinking in terms of engineering, cost, complications, etc., with the potential reconstruction in whatever way on Pier 5?
As far as reconstruction pricing and as it relates to the current status of the pier, we definitely hear that loud and clear, which is why the disposition process right now is following the engineering process. So not only did we want to assess the structure of the pier, but construction prices are changing dramatically monthly, it feels like. So we wanted to make sure we had the most up-to-date information, not only in what it would take to renovate the pier, but what those costs would actually be. And this will be included within the RFP process. So whoever wants to apply to submit a proposal for this will have that information available to them, and that will hopefully create an effective development plan, including rehabilitation or whatever path they choose based on that engineering study.
So as a follow-up to that, did the experience with the reconstruction on Pier 4, did that go better or worse, more complicated, less complicated? Were unanticipated problems found with that may affect Pier 5?
It's a fantastic question, and I know Natalie certainly is managing the disposition process, and we have our capital construction team that really led the work on Pier 4. So that was a $10 million project in which we were able to be on budget, and certainly there's always hiccups that arise through those periods of time. And I think looking at the piles and investigating further, we were able to and again, I'm not an engineer either in the maritime industry, so I can't speak with specifics, but I think there is a lot of applications around, what are potential creative ways to reinforce maybe an existing structure. And that was something that we investigated as part of this engineering study. So again, we don't want to prescribe what the outcome is going to be. So we looked at a variety of options, and I do think that the learnings of Pier 4 will be helpful in that. But Pier 4 is separate and aside. Pier 5 was very heavily engineered, and there is many more piles, and is a much worse shape than Pier 4 was. So I think it is slightly different in regards to the structure itself, but in terms of the ecosystem that's around it and some of the other things that could be uncovered in the process, there maybe is some learnings, but they are pretty different in terms of what their current condition is, or at least previous before all of the work was done.
All right, thank you.
Thank you both. Jules?
I have two quick questions, and Jean in the comments anticipated one. Is there any particular bias or preference for a floating versus a stationary versus a combo in this development process?
It's a great question, and one, again, to Rebecca's point on iterating, we would love to hear community feedback. But at this point, what we want to make sure that there's an openness for to consider as many proposals as possible, right? In our ideal world, we'd like to have as many respondents as possible so the community as well as internal staff can evaluate it. So at the moment, we haven't considered that, but if there's one that is of more desired than another one, I think that that's something we can absolutely consider as we go through the drafting the RFP and rank, highly advantageous. The criteria would be weighted highly for a certain one over the other.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I guess the one thing I would just add to that is certainly when you look at the structure itself, there are implications, there are cost implications, programming implications, the coastal resilience implications of all of those. And so I think that's why we're really biased towards seeing, what the proposals will look like before moving forward or advancing with a preferred concept, is because there's so many factors that contribute to what the structure itself should be to support those uses, and why, we're sort of leaving it a little bit open at this point. But again, knowing that there are a lot of different components that influence what that final structure would look like.
Just slight clarification on my own point there. A marina would not be part of what I was describing, because the community has expressed its concern that that's really a private development in almost any iteration, and that's not what you wrote, and that's not what we're expecting, at least from the people I've spoken to. My second quick question, maybe not a fair question because it's too big, but when Mayor Wu was here last Wednesday for a community coffee, I heard, and I wasn't there, that she said there'll be no commercial development on Pier 5. And that, I don't know what to do with that in the face of what you're writing here. Is this a mandate you've received from the mayor?
It is not one that we've received. I'm sure that she was talking with a lot of folks, and I was at the coffee hour, and I don't think she spoke of that specifically. I mean, we want to have this be responsive, and I think the mayor is very open to receiving the feedback from the community and the people that are most impacted by it. So I think based on what we are hearing tonight and what we've heard previously, that is the intention to inform the RFP, but we haven't necessarily received any other directives otherwise.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jules. Richard?
Tilburg? Yes.
Yes.
I finally figured out how to raise my hand. Couple questions. It's my understanding, and it's just word of mouth, that on Pier 4, you can only do a 1-year lease, and you're talking about a long-term lease for Pier 5. So the question is, what's the difference? And secondly, in your idea, what would a long-term lease constitute? How long would it be?
So there are overarching restrictions on Pier 4, and I'm going to butcher them, so I'm not going to call them out specifically, but I think because of how it came into the BPDA's possession in the first place, the Land and Conservation or Water Conservation Act, that restricts our ability to dispose of or to lease for a longer period of time. Those same restrictions are not the same on Pier 5, and again, I think that's because of how it came into the BPDA's possession in the first place. So we find that the most effective long-term leases are for 99 years, which enables the investment in these type of structures from an entity that we would be in partnership with, and in all essence sort of is a transfer, but enables us to have a seat at the table, be able to control the outcomes based on what we are hearing from the community, what is proposed in the RFP. And so it would likely be a long-term lease, 70 to 99 years, most likely.
Okay, and a second quick question is, I've heard no discussion of return on investment to the agency. Do I understand correctly that the $7 to $8 million infusion is for any one of the 3 different types of proposal, either the demolition or the other 2, which I forgot? And then do you all have an expectation, or what is your expectation of return on any investment you might make, either of the 7 or anything in addition to that?
Sorry, yeah, you are correct that the 78 would be utilized for any option. So again, because we are not being prescriptive, that is the general dollar amount that the BPDA would be able to provide to, in partnership with whatever proposal, you know, is most advantageous. I would say what we expect, and based on the uses that are being contemplated and sort of being asked for, that there is not a, you know, significant monetary value to those, and there will be a lot of creative sources of capital needed to be pulled together. And so to burden the project with an additional, you know, return on the investment that we were making is very unlikely. But again, we would need to weigh and see the proposals and to understand sort of what is being proposed. But it is not intended to be a moneymaker. And in fact, we are, you know, very much intending to be investing and co-investing to enable to, you know, make this development happen.
So there's no bias in favor of or against any form of development that may or may not return some amount of money to the RDA.
No, we will be contemplating the, you know, the feasibility of the project. So ensuring that, you know, whatever is proposed is actually feasible, but not in terms of, you know, a fee associated. That wouldn't be a major decision criteria.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Vera? Vera, you're still muted. Okay, we'll wait on Vera for a second. Chris?
Yes, thanks for holding this. And it does appear you've listened to us, at least as, you know, in the nature of how you summarized the input that you've received. And many of us have spent quite a bit of time making suggestions and trying to push the future use of Pier 5 in the direction that you did indeed summarize in the opening slide. And obviously, as you're now opening it up for an RFP, the big question will be, what will you receive? You are offering to help with the demolition, which theoretically means that if there is a creative use that's going to come up, that perhaps the economics of it might be less purely profitable than if it were a real estate development rather than the public space. But at the same time, public spaces tend not to be terribly profitable. So there's a concern there in terms of what information you will receive. So that's sort of a comment. And then my other concern relates to the whole issue of the nature of the flooding that we will have in the harbor. And I have also talked to any number of people involved in hydrologic studies to kind of differentiate our harbor from other places. And I do remind the group that although we will have periodic floods and they will get bigger over time, they will be transient. So there'll be overwashes and retreats, as opposed to a situation in coastal cities to the south, for example, without the tidal range that we have, or with large coastal fetches where they face multiple days of 10 feet of inundation or something like that. So that the nature of what needs to be done and how we treat our coastline to be more resilient to ever increasing infrequent flood surges is something which may be a little bit different than simply raising the height of the harbor walk. In fact, it may actually be counterproductive to raise the harbor walk, and you end up if you raise the harbor walk all the way around the city, you'll just allow the whole surge to go higher than it would otherwise have been, and it will impact more broadly wherever there is, wherever the weakness is, and then you get flooding behind that. So I'm interested in connecting and getting connected into that ongoing program to continue assessing that. But I do caution us all that the ever rising hardened shores, which can work, are also very destructive and may not may not be as necessary in this kind of a tidal environment than in other environments. That's it. So those are mostly comments, but I leave it at that.
Chris. Yes, and we'll definitely make sure that the flood vulnerability study, which again is covering the entirety of the coastline of Charlestown, so it will help us kind of look comprehensively about everything in addition to informing some of the design decisions. And yeah, we are eagerly awaiting their proposals too. So Zachary? Also, Vera, if you ever unmute, I just want to make sure you had space, but Zachary?
I was just wondering who is the coordinator with the new developments in the National Historic Park with respect to Pier 5 in terms of foot traffic and how the usage may interact and design may interact and so on. Who's coordinating that?
Just for clarification, you mean with the National Park Service?
Yes.
Yeah, so we have a great relationship. Speak with Michael Creasy very often from the National Park Service in Boston and also their federal location as well. So, beyond just the real estate team and our coordination with them, there is a lot of, interagency coordination with other BPDA members. So certainly as it related for Plan Charlestown and other things. So we are having a lot of conversations with them currently about coastal resilience and how they're looking at that. But I think to your point, it's a really great example to maybe engage a little bit more thoroughly with them on the visitors and access that they are trying to create and make sure that this project is connecting with that too. I know whether a year or two ago, they submitted or released their plan for reinvestment in the Navy Yard and sort of, what they're trying to do from a wayfinding perspective in addition to the development on their own site. So I think we should that's a very fair point that we should probably reference that too, and maybe see if there's anything else within that are suggestions that we can incorporate at Pier 5 as well.
I'd like to help with that.
That'd be great.
Thanks.
Yeah, feel free to email me and we can make sure that gets coordinated. Kathy?
Yeah, this may be putting the cart before the horse, but do you have any parameters or limitations that you're thinking about that may inform the RFP? I'm specifically thinking if there's, a pier with a lot of activity, are you considering it being a 24-hour operation? Or are you considering closing it down at 9 p.m.? I mean, has any of these issues come up, or is it just too premature to consider anything like that?
I think once we get a better sense of the use, we can get into the operating plans themselves. And certainly it's an expectation that any proposal that comes into the BPA not only details the development plan of how to construct whatever the vision is, but also how to operate it. So that's certainly something that will be detailed or expected to be detailed with the proposal, and also something that when the proposals are presented to the community, that neighborhood feedback, I think, is really helpful in helping them guide or iterate or change what those operations may be based on your feedback. So yeah, I think it'll be something to definitely bring up at the next community meeting when we hopefully get proposals.
And just to follow on other piers like New York, for example, Little Island and things, limits any kind of outside activities like private weddings or things like that. So again, it's premature, I'm sure, but these are a lot of things that other peers have had to grapple with. And, just to probably tap into contacts in other cities and to see how they handle those types of issues could be very helpful.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And that was certainly a part of this phase of the community process, was finding other cities with similar peers and seeing how they approach that. So definitely look forward to ironing out those details when we get there.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Diane?
Hi, thank you. I'd like to follow up on the flood resiliency approach, because one of the concerns we've had in the past is the BPDA has direct relationship with developers that want to build in flood zones. And I was told by one of the people in the organization, well, if they have insurance, then it's on to them if they want to build there or not. And for the rest of the communities, we're stuck with the cost of any of the rehabilitation of those flood zones, because of course the developers will be long gone and the people will have bought into a development site that the public will have to pay for. So I think it's very important that we have three legs on the stool in a process and have community engagement in that process to determine what is actually flood resilience. And we have people on this call tonight that are very knowledgeable about this information and have lived here long time, whereas some of the BPDA people have not even lived in this city for a year. So I would really highly encourage that we have some community people that serve on that flood resiliency so that we can really best establish what is proper for any kind of development and what is proper to really define what will go at Pier 5, because we've been at it for a long time, and over 30 years, we've asked for a public park. And I would hate for some expert somewhere who has not had any experience with this at all to come up to a conclusion that, you know, the community has to react against. It would be better if we're in the process. So I hope you might approach this with a new community engagement protocol.
Thanks, Diane.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, I think we really appreciate that feedback and knowing it's a little bit outside of the scope of Pier 5, but that we want Pier 5 to be as resilient as possible and to consider, you know, obviously the threats of sea level rise and coastal flooding. To give a little update on the coastal resilience work. So we are hoping to engage with a consultant to work with us on some of this designing and scoping, and there will be a heavy community engagement component to that. That work has not yet begun, and so we need to bring on that you know, that consultant to help us with this work and to be able to, you know, do the initial pulling of all the information, building off of Climate Ready Boston. So just, I think, Diane, to share that we will be having a lot of engagement around it, and that's hoping to come once we have someone on board. And we're hoping to do that by sort of the June, July timeframe.
Okay, just a quick follow-up on that. A lot of people in this community take vacations in the summertime, so I really would caution also that for all of us that really want to be engaged in this process, because we would be excited to have a public park here, that we would not like to have something happen during our absence if we're away on vacation. So like I said, if we have community engagement, I think it's a better protocol, and I hope you'll consider it.
Point is very well taken, and that's something that we know and experience a lot through all the engagement we've had with Charlestown. So certainly as it relates to this process and then the coastal resilience process as well, which we expect to take over a year's time just for this initial engagement and design conversation. So that will be a long process, and this certainly we acknowledge and appreciate that folks take time off. So we want to make sure that we are responsive to that. So there's going to be a period in which we are seeking proposals, and that is likely, you know, over the summer into the fall, and then likely to have those conversations and the presentations in the fall.
Bill?
Yes, hi. Thank you for having the meeting. I just wanted to say that I wanted to kind of echo that in your presentation at the beginning, I thought you did capture a lot of the comments that had came before, and I just find this a very exciting project to take a place right in the harbor and kind of imagine the public infrastructure that it could turn into. And here we are having an RFP to kind of realize what could be possible with that. You know, the aspects that really resonated with me on this is a space that people can actually engage with the water directly. And I know that was added and echoed by many people. And I just wanted to say, I thought that came through. And then an education and a resiliency approach where we can, you know, take the things that are happening within our harbor and try to turn them into a positive by showing, you know, really the types of development that can be done that incorporate these and create a gem of a space right next to the history that exists with the Constitution and everything. And it could be a juxtapost between the past and and the future. So it's an exciting project, and I really want to thank the city for taking it on.
I find it exciting too. So thank you for coming tonight and giving your comments as well. Zach?
Somebody was talking about money earlier, but working together, we have to put together, I think, some structure where the public has, there has to be a public-private project. And there is money out there from things like battlefield ground grants. And I spoke with some people about that, and the pier fits that description. There are several of them. There are a lot of grants, but it requires the permission of the people to raise money for public land. And the Preservation Commission has a template letter for that. And I'd like to get that signed so, you know, the public can actually start considering and figuring out ways to raise money.
And I'd love to learn more about that. So that's something I hope we can connect afterwards, and any way that I can help you partner, I'm happy to learn more too.
Thanks.
Sure. I see no more hands. Anybody, any other hands? Dan?
There you go. The one thing that I think we also have to look at is something that's more global for the whole area than just the pier itself, because we don't have any planning per se. I know that's your in your name, but as such, there isn't any global space planning in Charlestown to define what spaces make sense for the different activities. And you know, I proposed a while ago a channel swimming space 15, 20 years now, because I knew that the Clarity Pool in itself, as we grew, would be overstretched with its resources. So we do need to think long-term of another swim space for general swimming for kids and adults. So I don't know if the harbor itself makes the best space, because it is also very windy on certain days, while the channel space is a little less. But you know, we do need another swim space. There's no doubt about it. Just a matter of where. But we need to really think more globally, and I don't think we've done that. We seem to be picking little spaces here and there with ideas, which are all important. Don't get me wrong, but we don't look at the global picture. You know, take Charlestown in its entirety. What makes sense where? And I think we need to do that. That's it.
Thank you, Dan. No, I appreciate that perspective and thinking holistically. And again, following this meeting, or tomorrow, there should be a public comment period being launched. And again, as Rebecca mentioned before, this is still something we're seeking feedback on from this meeting and wanting to incorporate it as we draft the actual RFP. So, you know, Dan, you always comment and thoroughly do so, and I appreciate that every time. So we'll make sure to hopefully keep an eye out for that. I want to make some time and space, especially if you haven't had the chance to speak. We can wrap things up soon, but want to make sure that we have a few more minutes if there's any other questions or comments. Diane?
Did you hear from anybody make inquiries about developing this space beyond what we heard the last time for development? Has anybody come forward to do a public-private partnership like in East Boston, where they did Pierce Park 3?
We have not been approached. I have not been approached. So I do hope that people are engaging in this process and hearing about it. And of course, we're still iterating on the RFP, but yeah, I I hope the proposals come back and we can see, hopefully the responses coming through. If there are no other questions, just a few wrap up comments. So again, just wanted to thank everyone for coming out tonight. If you're new here or if you've been continuing to follow this project for many years, it's just really appreciated, all that work that you put in to make these comments and give us this context. So what you can expect for a timeline, as I kind of mentioned before, is that we're going to work now to start writing this RFP and all the details it requires and hopefully release it in the early summer. And the idea is that hopefully that the developers or any proponent is taking the summer to respond to this RFP, which we hope to put out for about 90 days. And then by the fall, when we receive these proposals, they'll be posted on the website, and then a community meeting will be held to present them. So I think my colleagues have already put the comments, my email within the chat, as well as the link to the disposition website for this site. So there you can see the presentation that we did tonight, the recording of this meeting. So if anybody missed it and wish they had checked it out, feel free to send it to them. The chat will also be uploaded. So any conversations that were happening along the chat will be able to be reviewed for public reference. The engineering report and all the information is already listed there as well. So with that, we have one more hand from Richard that I'll take you as the last question, and then look forward to working with everybody else on this too. So Richard?
Just a very quick question. You said that you do the RFP and then deliver it. I thought in the conversation we had earlier, there was going to be some kind of review of the RFP before it got distributed. Is from the community. Was I incorrect in that?
We will hold a public comment. So this is the draft development and design kind of guidelines was what's shown today. And the hope is that if there are any other additional comments of things we need to elevate and prioritize, that in this public comment period, which will be on the website, there will be a portal, you can type it in, that will be considered as a part of it. So if there's any emerging thoughts, we've already taken notes on this meeting too. We're going to make sure to iterate and bring that in together and incorporate it into the RFP. So this was hopefully the community meeting to discuss what those high levels are and any adjustments that need to be made. We're going to make those following this meeting.
Okay, so the short answer is that the community will not have a chance to review the actual four corners of every page of the RFP until such time that it's been distributed to the entire known world.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So with that, again, if you have any questions, if you have any difficulty accessing information or need anything, feel free to shoot me an email. And again, I just wanted to thank you all for coming out tonight and look forward to working with you through this process. So take care, everybody. Have a good night.